The November rain hammered against the windows of the R train as it rumbled through the tunnel beneath the East River. Emma Walsh pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the darkness blur past, punctuated by occasional flashes of tunnel lights. Her reflection stared back at her, 28 years old, dark hair pulled into a practical bun, gray eyes that had once sparkled with ambition, now dulled by 4 years of corporate monotony. It was 6:47 a.m. The subway car was packed with the usual morning crowd, construction workers heading to job sites, nurses returning from night shifts, bleary-eyed professionals like herself, all trapped in the same exhausting rhythm. The smell of damp coats and burnt coffee filled the air. Someone's umbrella dripped water onto Emma's shoes, but she didn't bother moving. What was one more small indignity in a life that had become a collection of them? Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother in Boston. "Hope you have a wonderful day, sweetheart. Remember, you're doing important work." Emma's jaw tightened. Important work. If only her mother knew. The train lurched to a stop at Lexington Avenue. Emma joined the surge of bodies pushing through the doors, up the stairs, into the gray morning light of Manhattan. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the wind cut through her thin coat. She'd been meaning to buy a new one for 2 winters now, but somehow the money always disappeared into rent, student loans, and the endless small expenses of surviving in New York City. The glass tower of Morrison & Associates loomed ahead, 43 stories of steel and tinted windows reflecting the low clouds. Emma had once felt proud walking through those revolving doors. She'd been so naive. The lobby was all polished marble and artificial lighting. Emma swiped her badge, nodded to the security guard, Marcus, who always had a kind word, and joined the crowd at the elevators. Nobody spoke. They were all too tired, too focused on their phones, too trapped in their own private struggles. The 32nd floor, Morrison & Associates, attorneys at law. The reception area was designed to intimidate and impress. Leather furniture, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the Manhattan skyline. Emma walked past it all, down the carpeted hallway to her small desk outside Richard Morrison's office. Her boss. She set down her bag and powered on her computer. The routine was so ingrained she could do it in her sleep. Check Morrison's calendar, prepare his morning briefing, organize the day's files, make sure his coffee was ready at precisely 8:15 a.m. Emma. She looked up. David Chen, a junior associate she'd considered a friend, stood by her desk. His expression was uncomfortable. "Good morning, David," she said carefully. He glanced around, lowered his voice. "Did you really do it? Did you really file that complaint with HR?" Emma's stomach dropped. She had filed the report 3 days ago, after weeks of deliberation. She'd discovered that Morrison had been systematically overcharging vulnerable clients, elderly people, immigrants with limited English, anyone who wouldn't question the bills. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. The evidence was clear in the files she'd been managing for months. "I had to," Emma said quietly. "What he's doing is wrong, David. You've seen the same files I have." David's face hardened. "You should have talked to me first. You should have thought about the consequences. The consequences of doing the right thing. The consequences of being realistic. This is Morrison & Associates. Richard Morrison built this firm from nothing. He has connections throughout the city. And you—" He stopped, shook his head. "You're just a secretary, Emma." The words hit like a slap. Just a secretary. As if 4 years of dedication, of managing Morrison's entire professional life, of catching his mistakes and covering his absences, meant nothing. "I thought you'd back me up," Emma said, hating how small her voice sounded. "You told me you agreed that what he's doing is wrong. Agreeing in private and making a formal accusation are 2 different things." David straightened his tie, his discomfort morphing into something harder. "I have a career to think about. A family. I can't afford to make enemies here." He walked away, leaving Emma standing alone at her desk. The morning deteriorated from there. At 9:01 a.m., Emma was called into Morrison's office. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate. He looked like the picture of success and respectability. Emma had once admired him. "Sit down, Emma," he said, his voice cold. She sat. "I'm going to make this brief," Morrison continued. "Your services are no longer required at this firm. Human Resources has prepared your termination paperwork. You have 1 hour to clear your desk and leave the building." Emma's heart pounded. "Mr. Morrison, if this is about the complaint—" "This has nothing to do with any complaint," he interrupted smoothly. Your performance has been unsatisfactory for some time. We're simply moving in a different direction. That's not true. My performance reviews have all been excellent. Morrison's smile was thin and dangerous. Employment in this firm is at will, Emma. We don't need a reason to terminate you. However, I'll be generous and provide a reference that says you left of your own accord. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to make this difficult. The threat was clear. Fight this, and she'd be destroyed. Emma stood on shaking legs. I have documentation, proof of what you've been doing. Do you? Morrison leaned back in his chair, completely calm. Because I'm quite certain that any firm documents are protected by attorney-client privilege. Taking them would be theft. Sharing them would be a violation of confidentiality agreements you signed when you were hired. Either offense would result in legal action against you personally. Do you have the resources to defend yourself against this firm's attorneys, Emma? She didn't. He knew she didn't. I did the right thing, Emma said, her voice trembling with anger now, not fear. You made a foolish mistake. In 5 years, no one in this city will hire you. I'll make certain of that. Morrison turned his attention back to his computer screen. You have 1 hour. Security will escort you out if necessary. The walk back to her desk felt endless. People avoided her eyes. They already knew. David was nowhere to be seen. The HR representative, a cold woman named Patricia, was waiting with a cardboard box and termination papers. Emma signed them. She had no choice. She packed her few personal items, a photo of her mother, a plant that had somehow survived 4 years of fluorescent lighting, a favorite pen. Everything fit in one small box. 4 years of her life, reduced to objects that could be carried in 2 hands. Marcus, the security guard, looked genuinely sad as she turned in her badge. I'm sorry, Ms. Walsh, he said quietly. You were always kind. Those words, that small kindness, almost broke her. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and pushed through the revolving doors into the rain. It was 10:30 a.m. The street was busy with mid-morning traffic, delivery trucks, pedestrians with umbrellas. Emma stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box, feeling the rain soak through her coat. She had no idea what to do next. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Emma Walsh? A smooth male voice, unfamiliar. Yes? This is James Whitmore from Prescott Legal Services. I'm calling regarding your recent application for the paralegal position. Emma's stomach twisted. She hadn't applied anywhere yet. I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. No mistake, we received your resume this morning, but I'm afraid we've decided to pursue other candidates. Thank you for your interest. He hung up. Emma stared at her phone. Morrison. He was already making calls. Already ensuring she couldn't find work elsewhere. Her phone rang again. Another law firm. Another rejection for a position she hadn't applied for. Then, another. And another. By the time she reached the subway station, Emma had received 7 calls. Morrison was systematically destroying her reputation across Manhattan's legal community. By tomorrow, every firm in the city would have heard that Emma Walsh was troublesome, unreliable, someone to avoid. She sat on the subway, the box on her lap, and felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't despair. It was rage. Pure, burning rage. She'd tried to do the right thing. She'd followed the proper channels. She'd trusted the system, and the system had crushed her without hesitation. The train emerged from the tunnel into weak afternoon light. Emma got off at her usual stop, but instead of heading to her small studio apartment, she walked. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray, heavy with the promise of more. She walked down Fifth Avenue, past the designer stores she'd never been able to afford, past the restaurants where Morrison took clients on the firm's expense account. Her anger built with each step, hot and sharp in her chest. She turned onto 57th Street and stopped. There, parked in front of a luxury hotel, was a car that made her rage crystallize into something focused and dangerous. A Bentley Continental GT. Matte black, sleek and powerful, worth more than Emma would earn in 5 years. It was parked arrogantly across 2 spaces, as if the normal rules didn't apply, as if the world existed for the convenience of whoever owned such a car. Emma stared at it. Someone who could afford this car would never know what it felt like to choose between groceries and rent. They'd never stand in a subway car that reeked of desperation. They'd never be destroyed by someone more powerful just for trying to do what was right. The unfairness of it all crashed over her. Before she could think, before she could reason, Emma set down her box and walked to the car. Her movements felt dreamlike, disconnected. She looked around. The street was busy, but no one was paying attention to her. She pulled her leg back and kicked the driver's side door as hard as she could. The impact sent pain shooting through her foot, but the satisfaction was immediate. A dent appeared in the perfect black surface, proof that this untouchable thing could be touched, that something expensive and protected could be damaged. Emma kicked it again and again. The third kick left a larger dent. The metal warped and buckled. She stepped back, breathing hard, her heart pounding. What had she done? A security camera on the hotel's exterior wall blinked with a small red light. She'd been recorded. Evidence of her destruction. Emma picked up her box and walked away quickly, her hands shaking. She'd just committed vandalism. She could be arrested. She could face criminal charges on top of everything else. But as she turned the corner and disappeared into the crowd, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. For the first time in years, she'd done something that felt entirely honest. She had no idea that the car belonged to Dominic Russo. 3 blocks away, in a private office above an upscale Italian restaurant, Dominic Russo sat behind a desk of dark wood, reviewing contracts for a new development project in Brooklyn. At 35, he'd built an empire that spanned legitimate real estate development and other, less visible enterprises. He wore his power the way other men wore cologne, subtly but unmistakably present. His phone buzzed. Marco, his head of security. "We have a situation with your car." Dominic's expression didn't change. "Explain." "Someone damaged it. The driver's side door. Hotel security footage captured everything." "Theft?" "No. Vandalism. A woman. Young, professional looking. She just kicked it. Multiple times. Then walked away." Dominic set down his pen. In his world, such an act meant something. A message from a rival, perhaps. A challenge. An insult that required response. "Send me the footage." A minute later, his phone chimed. Dominic opened the video file. The footage was clear, shot from an elevated angle. It showed a woman in a rain-dampened coat carrying a cardboard box. She approached his car, set down the box, and kicked the door with what appeared to be significant force. But it was her face that caught Dominic's attention. She wasn't scared. She wasn't looking around nervously like someone committing a planned crime. Her expression was pure, raw fury, desperation mixed with rage. Each kick seemed to release something from deep inside her. This wasn't about his car. This was about something else entirely. Dominic replayed the footage, studied her face, the way her shoulders shook after the third kick, the way she looked at the damage she'd caused, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of desperate defiance. "Find her," Dominic said into the phone. "Sir, I want to know who she is. Everything about her. Where she lives, where she works, why she was carrying a box at 11 in the morning. Everything. And when we find her?" Dominic replayed the video one more time, watching this woman who had dared to damage something that belonged to him. In a city where everyone feared his name, someone had touched what was his without hesitation. "When you find her," Dominic said slowly, "arrange a meeting. I want to talk to her myself." He ended the call and sat back in his chair, a slight smile on his face. It had been a long time since anyone had surprised him. This woman, whoever she was, had just done exactly that. Emma reached her apartment building in Astoria as the afternoon light began to fade. The building was old, the neighborhood decent, but not trendy, the kind of place where working people lived paycheck to paycheck. Her studio was on the 4th floor. She climbed the stairs, her kicked foot throbbing now, and unlocked her door to the familiar small space. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room. A tiny kitchen. A bathroom with perpetually dripping faucet she couldn't afford to fix. Emma set down her box and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. What had she done? The full reality was settling in now. She'd been fired. She was blacklisted. She'd committed vandalism that was caught on camera. Her savings would last maybe 2 months if she was careful. After that, her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Sarah. "Coffee tomorrow? I want to hear about the new project at work." Emma closed her eyes. She'd have to tell Sarah she'd been fired. She'd have to tell her mother. She'd have to figure out how to survive in one of the most expensive cities in the world with no income and no prospects. But tonight, she was too tired and too angry to face any of it. Emma changed into old pajamas, made instant ramen because it was cheap, and sat by her window watching the lights of the city flicker on as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, someone owned a damaged Bentley. Someone who probably had lawyers and resources and connections. Someone who would want justice for what she'd done. Emma should have been terrified. Instead, She felt strangely calm. She'd been destroyed by the system she'd trusted. She'd lost everything by trying to do the right thing. What more could the universe possibly take from her? She finished her ramen, washed the bowl, and went to bed. She had no idea that in a luxury office across the city, a man was watching footage of her, fascinated by the fire in her eyes. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. She had no idea that Dominic Russo always found what he was looking for, and he was looking for her. 3 days after kicking the Bentley, Emma Walsh sat in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, watching her bank account balance shrink with each transaction. Rent, pending. Student loan overdue. Phone bill, urgent. The numbers glowed accusingly on her phone screen. A digital countdown to disaster. Another coffee? The barista, a young woman with purple hair and kind eyes, gestured to Emma's empty cup. Just water, please, Emma said, managing a smile. She'd been nursing one cup for 3 hours using the cafe's free Wi-Fi to submit job applications. So far, she'd sent out 47 resumes. She'd received 47 rejections. Morrison's reach was longer than she'd imagined. The cafe was warm and busy, filled with the afternoon crowd of freelancers and students. Outside, November rain streaked the windows, turning Brooklyn into a watercolor painting of gray and brown. Emma pulled her cardigan tighter. She'd been staying with Sarah for the past 2 days, sleeping on her couch in a cramped apartment in Park Slope. Her own studio's rent was due in a week, and she had no idea how she'd pay it. Her phone buzzed. Another automated rejection email. Emma set the phone face down on the table and stared out the window. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? A week ago, she'd had a job, an apartment, a future. Now she had a cardboard box of personal items and a growing sense of panic she couldn't quite suppress. The cafe door opened, bringing in a gust of cold air and 2 men in expensive suits. They didn't belong here. This was a neighborhood cafe, the kind of place where people wore hoodies and argued about art films. These men looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Tailored suits, polished shoes, the kind of quiet confidence that came with money and power. Emma noticed them immediately. Something about their purposeful entrance made her uneasy. They scanned the cafe, and their eyes landed on her. Emma's heart began to pound. They walked directly to her table. Emma Walsh? The first man was in his 40s, dark hair graying at the temples with a face that suggested he smiled rarely. His voice was polite but firm. Emma's mouth went dry. Who's asking? My name is Marco Castellani. This is my colleague, Vincent. The second man nodded. He was younger, broader, with watchful eyes that catalogued everything. We'd like to speak with you about an incident that occurred 3 days ago on 57th Street. The Bentley. They'd found her. Emma forced herself to breathe normally. I don't know what you're talking about. Marco pulled out a phone, showed her the screen. It was security footage. Emma approaching the car, kicking it, walking away. The image quality was crystal clear. We're not the police, Ms. Walsh, Marco said, tucking the phone away. We represent the owner of the vehicle you damaged. He would like to speak with you. Tell your boss I'll pay for the repairs, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll need some time, but I'll pay every cent. The repair cost is approximately $8,000. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. $8,000. She didn't have $800. However, Marco continued, our employer isn't interested in payment. He simply wants to meet with you. A conversation, nothing more. And if I refuse? Marco's expression remained neutral. Mr. Russo is not a man who accepts refusal easily, but he's asked us to be courteous. He genuinely wants to talk to you, Ms. Walsh. No threats, no consequences, just a conversation. Who is Mr. Russo? Someone who believes your situation warrants his personal attention. Marco gestured to the door. There's a car outside. We'll take you to meet him now if you're willing. You'll be back here within 2 hours, you have my word. Emma looked between the 2 men. Everything about this screamed danger. Normal people didn't send men in expensive suits to track down someone over a damaged car. Normal people called the police or their insurance company. But Emma was out of options. She had no money for a lawyer, no resources to fight whatever legal action they might take. And some desperate part of her was curious about who would go to such lengths over a kicked door. If I go with you, how do I know I'll be safe? Vincent spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly gentle. Ms. Walsh, if Mr. Russo wanted to harm you, we wouldn't be sitting in a cafe asking politely. It was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. Emma closed her laptop, gathered her things. 2 hours. Then I want to be brought back here. You have my word, Marco said. The car outside was a black Mercedes, understated but clearly expensive. Marco held the door open for her. Emma slid into the back seat, her heart hammering against her ribs. Vincent sat beside her, Marco in the front passenger seat. A driver she hadn't seen before pulled smoothly into traffic. They drove in silence through Brooklyn, across the Brooklyn Bridge, into Manhattan. Emma watched the city slide past. The neighborhoods where she'd once felt at home now seemed foreign and intimidating. She tried to memorize the route, some survival instinct telling her to pay attention. The car pulled up to a restaurant in Little Italy. The sign read, Lucia's, in elegant script. Even from outside, Emma could see it was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance. Marco opened her door. This way, please. The restaurant was closed. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but someone unlocked the door from inside. The interior was beautiful. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, soft lighting that suggested intimacy and luxury. It was completely empty, except for one table in the back, where a man sat alone, reading a document. He looked up as they approached. Dominic Russo was not what Emma expected. She'd imagined someone older, perhaps thuggish, the stereotype of someone who'd send men to track down a stranger. Instead, he was probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that assessed her with uncomfortable intensity. He wore a gray suit that probably cost more than her former monthly salary, but he wore it casually, like someone completely comfortable with power. Ms. Walsh, he said, standing. His voice was smooth, cultured with just a trace of a New York accent. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Emma remained standing. I didn't really have a choice. A slight smile touched his lips. No, I suppose you didn't, but I appreciate your cooperation nonetheless. May I offer you something? Coffee? Wine? Lunch? I want to know why I'm here. Direct, I like that. Dominic gestured to Marco and Vincent, who retreated to a table near the entrance close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to provide privacy. Please sit. I promise this conversation will be worth your time. Emma sat, perching on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt. Dominic sat across from her, completely relaxed. 3 days ago, he began, you damaged my car, a Bentley Continental GT worth approximately $200,000. Emma swallowed hard. I'll pay for the repairs, it'll take time, but I don't care about the repairs. Dominic leaned back, studying her. What I care about is why. You weren't drunk. You weren't homeless or desperate in the way that drives people to random destruction. You were carrying a box, wearing professional clothes, and you kicked my car with the kind of anger that suggested very specific frustration. So I had Marco do some research. He pulled out a folder, set it on the table. Emma Walsh, 28 years old, Boston University, degree in English literature. Worked for 4 years as a secretary at Morrison & Associates. Fired 3 days ago, the same day you damaged my car. Reason for termination. Officially listed as poor performance, but we both know that's not true. Emma felt exposed, vulnerable. You had me investigated? I'm a curious man, Ms. Walsh. And when someone does something unexpected, I like to understand why. Dominic opened the folder. You filed a complaint with Human Resources about Richard Morrison. You discovered he was overcharging clients. Elderly people, immigrants, vulnerable individuals who wouldn't question the bills. You reported it through the proper channels. And for doing the right thing, you were destroyed. How do you know all this? I have resources, and I have experience with men like Morrison. Dominic's expression hardened slightly. He's been overcharging clients for years. He's also been involved in some less savory business dealings. Real estate fraud mostly. Small scale, difficult to prosecute, but ethically bankrupt. Emma stared at him. Why would you care about any of this? Because I understand what it's like to be dismissed by people who believe power makes them untouchable. Dominic closed the folder. Morrison blacklisted you. He's made calls to every major law firm in Manhattan. He's ensuring you can't find work anywhere in the legal field. He's using his influence to punish you for having principles. It was hearing it stated so plainly that made Emma's eyes burn with frustrated tears. She blinked them back furiously. So what? You brought me here to tell me my life is ruined? I already know that. I brought you here to offer you a job. Emma's breath caught. What? I need a personal assistant. Someone organized, intelligent, and, most importantly, someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it costs them everything. Dominic met her eyes. You kicked my car because you were angry at a world that punishes honesty. That interests me. You want to hire me because I vandalized your property? I want to hire you because you have courage. Most people in this city are afraid of poverty, of powerful people, of consequences. You were afraid too, I imagine, but you acted anyway. That's rare. Emma shook her head, trying to process this. What kind of job? I own Russo Enterprises. We're a real estate development company. Luxury properties, commercial buildings, residential complexes. It's completely legitimate. All proper licensing and contracts. I need someone to manage my schedule, handle correspondence, coordinate with contractors and investors. Standard executive assistant work. And the pay? $80,000 a year to start. Health insurance, 2 weeks vacation. The damage to my car is forgiven as a signing bonus. It was more than Emma had earned at Morrison's firm. It was enough to solve her immediate financial crisis and then some. It was too good to be true. Why would you offer this to me? You don't know me. Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. In my experience, Ms. Walsh, loyalty can't be bought. It has to be earned. You risked everything to expose Morrison's corruption, even knowing it would cost you. That tells me more about your character than any resume or reference ever could. I don't understand your world. I'm not qualified. You managed Morrison's entire professional life for 4 years. You coordinated schedules, handled sensitive documents, dealt with demanding clients. You're more qualified than you think. Dominic leaned forward slightly. I'm offering you a lifeline, Emma. You can refuse, walk away, try to rebuild on your own, or you can accept and have a job starting tomorrow morning. Emma's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that men didn't offer jobs like this without ulterior motives. But what choice did she have? Her savings were nearly gone. Sarah's couch couldn't be a long-term solution, and the desperation she'd felt 3 days ago when she kicked his car had only grown stronger. What aren't you telling me? Emma asked quietly. Dominic smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. You're perceptive. Yes, there are things about my business I'm not telling you, but the job I'm offering is legitimate. You'll work in an office, handle real estate transactions, coordinate with architects and city officials. Nothing illegal, nothing that would compromise your principles. And if I discover something I don't agree with, then we'll discuss it, like adults. I'm not Morrison, Emma. I don't punish people for having integrity. Dominic stood, extended his hand. So what do you say? Do you want a job? Or do you want to keep drowning? Emma looked at his hand. This was a decision that would change her life. She could feel it. Everything about this man suggested danger, complexity, a world she didn't understand. But he was also offering her survival. She thought about her bank account, her mother's worried phone calls, Sarah's kindness that couldn't last forever, the suffocating panic of unemployment. Emma stood and shook his hand. When do I start? Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Russo Enterprises, 520 Fifth Avenue, 28th floor. Dominic released her hand. Marco will give you all the details. Welcome to my team, Emma. As Marco drove her back to Brooklyn, Emma stared out the window and wondered what she'd just agreed to. The relief of having a job was overwhelming, but underneath it ran a current of unease. Men like Dominic Russo didn't appear out of nowhere to save struggling secretaries. There was something he wasn't telling her, something that explained why he'd gone to such lengths to find her. But as the car pulled up to the cafe where she'd left her laptop, Emma realized she was too tired to care. She had a job. She had a chance. Whatever else happened, she'd figure it out as she went. Ms. Walsh, Marco said as she opened the door. A word of advice? Emma turned back. Mr. Russo is fair, but he values loyalty above all else. Don't betray his trust and he'll treat you well. Betray him. Marco's expression was neutral, but his eyes held a warning. Just don't. Emma nodded and stepped out into the rain. That evening, Emma sat in Sarah's small living room trying to explain the inexplicable. Sarah was 29, a graphic designer with a sharp mind and zero patience for nonsense. They'd been friends since college, and Sarah had been Emma's anchor through every crisis. Let me get this straight, Sarah said, pacing the narrow space between the couch and the TV. Strange men found you in a cafe, drove you to meet some mysterious businessman, and he offered you a job because you kicked his car? When you say it like that, it sounds insane. Because it is insane, Emma. Sarah stopped pacing, sat down hard on the coffee table facing her friend. Normal people don't hire people who vandalize their property. Normal people press charges. He said he was impressed by my courage. That's what they all say before they ask you to do something illegal. Emma had expected this reaction. Sarah was protective, skeptical of anyone who seemed too good to be true. Usually Emma appreciated that quality. Right now, it was exhausting. I researched him, Emma said, pulling out her phone. Dominic Russo. He's all over the internet. Russo Enterprises is a major player in New York real estate. They've developed properties in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens. Everything seems legitimate. City permits, awards from business organizations, profiles in real estate magazines. Sarah took the phone, scrolled through the search results. Okay, so his company is real. That doesn't mean he's trustworthy. I don't have a choice, Sarah. I'm out of money. Morrison blacklisted me. No one else will hire me. There are other cities. Boston, Philadelphia, D.C. And how do I afford to move? How do I explain the gap in my resume? Morrison will give me a terrible reference anywhere I apply. Emma felt tears threatening again and forced them back. I'm drowning, Sarah. This is the only lifeline I've got. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler. I'm scared for you. This whole situation feels wrong. I know. I'm scared too. Emma took her phone back. But I'm more scared of being homeless. I'm more scared of calling my mom and telling her I've failed. I'm more scared of the panic I feel every time I look at my bank account. Sarah pulled Emma into a hug. Okay, you take the job, but promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll walk away if anything feels wrong. I promise. And promise me you'll check in every day. If I don't hear from you by 6 p.m., I'm calling the police. You're being dramatic. Someone has to be. Sarah pulled back, held Emma by the shoulders. You're my best friend. You're allowed to kick expensive cars when you're angry, and I'm allowed to worry when mysterious men offer you suspiciously perfect jobs. Emma laughed despite herself. Deal. That night, lying on Sarah's couch, Emma couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the conversation with Dominic Russo, analyzing every word, every expression. He'd seemed genuine, professional, almost kind. But there had been something underneath, an intensity, a sense of controlled power that suggested he was accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. She thought about Marco's warning. Don't betray his trust. What kind of employer required loyalty warnings from their security team? Emma stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city through Sarah's thin walls. Sirens in the distance, neighbors arguing above, the constant hum of traffic. This was New York, dangerous and beautiful, full of people trying to survive, trying to make it, trying to find their place in a city that chewed up the weak and spit them out. Tomorrow, she'd walk into Russo Enterprises and begin a job she didn't fully understand, working for a man who unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. It was possibly the worst decision she'd ever made, or possibly the best. Emma wouldn't know until it was too late to turn back. Dominic Russo sat in his private office above Lucia's restaurant, the same folder about Emma Walsh open on his desk. Marco stood by the window, waiting. What do you think? Dominic asked. I think she's honest to a fault, Marco said, which makes her either very valuable or very dangerous. Both, probably. Dominic closed the folder. But she's exactly what we need right now. Someone clean, someone without connections to any of the families, someone who won't be suspected of anything. And when she figures out what we really do, then we'll have an interesting conversation. Dominic smiled slightly. She's smarter than Morrison gave her credit for. She'll figure things out eventually. The question is whether she'll stay or run. You're taking a significant risk. Life is risk, Marco. Besides, Dominic looked at the security footage still frozen on his computer screen. Emma's face caught mid-kick, furious and desperate and alive. She kicked my car. She damaged my property and walked away without fear of consequences. When was the last time anyone in this city did something like that? Never, as far as I can recall. Exactly. She's either foolish or fearless. Either way, I want to know which. Dominic shut his laptop. Make sure the office is ready for her tomorrow. And Marco? Keep an eye on her for the first few weeks. Not obviously, but I want to know if anyone approaches her, if Morrison tries anything, if she seems uncomfortable. You're protecting her. I'm protecting my investment, Dominic corrected. She's going to be useful, Marco. I can feel it. After Marco left, Dominic sat alone in his office, thinking about the woman who'd inadvertently walked into his world by kicking his car. He'd been honest with her about most things. The job was real. The salary was real. Russo Enterprises was legitimate. What he hadn't told her was that legitimate business was only one part of what he did. But she'd learn that soon enough. And when she did, Dominic would discover whether Emma Walsh's courage extended beyond moments of desperate anger to something more valuable, the ability to navigate moral complexity without losing herself. He hoped she had it in her. It had been a long time since anyone had interested him this much. Outside, New York City glittered in the darkness. Millions of people pursuing millions of dreams, most of them destined to fail. But some rare few, found something they weren't looking for and discovered it changed everything. Dominic suspected Emma Walsh was about to become one of those few. Tomorrow would tell. Emma stood outside 525th Avenue at 7:45 in the morning, staring up at the gleaming tower of glass and steel. The building was impressive, modern architecture that spoke of wealth and success, with a lobby visible through floor-to-ceiling windows that promised luxury within. This was really happening. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night researching Dominic Russo and his company. Everything she found confirmed what he'd told her. Russo Enterprises was a major player in New York real estate development. Projects across all 5 boroughs, partnerships with the city, features in business publications. On paper, it all looked legitimate and impressive, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The November morning was cold and crisp, the kind of weather that made New York feel alive with possibility. Business people streamed past her into various buildings, all purposeful, all belonging to this world of commerce and ambition. Emma adjusted her blazer, one of only 2 professional outfits she owned, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was stunning, marble floors, contemporary art on the walls, a security desk staffed by professionals in neat uniforms. This wasn't like Morrison's old money traditional decor. This was new money, confident and unapologetic. Emma Walsh, she told the security guard. I'm starting today at Russo Enterprises. He checked his tablet, found her name, and smiled. 28th floor. They're expecting you. You'll need this. He handed her a temporary access badge. Welcome to the building. The elevator ride felt both too long and too short. Emma watched the numbers climb, her reflection multiplying in the mirrored walls. She looked nervous, she realized. She forced her expression into something more professional, more confident. The doors opened onto a reception area that took her breath away. The entire floor was open and modern, with glass walls separating different areas, contemporary furniture, and windows that offered sweeping views of Manhattan. The Russo Enterprises logo, a stylized R in dark blue, was mounted on the wall behind a sleek reception desk. A young woman looked up and smiled. You must be Emma. I'm Jennifer, the receptionist. Mr. Russo asked me to bring you to his office when you arrived. Emma followed Jennifer through the space, trying not to gawk. Employees worked at clean, modern desks. Everything was organized, professional, and clearly expensive. She caught glimpses of architects bent over plans, people on phone calls discussing permits and contractors, the normal business of a development company. They reached a corner office with glass walls, currently frosted for privacy, and Jennifer knocked before opening the door. Dominic Russo stood at the windows, phone to his ear, looking out at the city. He wore a navy suit today, and in the morning light, he looked younger than he had in the restaurant. He gestured for Emma to enter, held up one finger, 1 minute, and continued his conversation. I don't care what the contractor says, Tony. We need that site ready by December 1st or we're facing penalties. No, not acceptable. Then find someone who can do it on time. Emma waited, taking in the office. It was large, but not ostentatiously so. Clean desk, computer, filing cabinets, and, surprisingly, several photographs. One showed Dominic with an elderly woman, both of them laughing. Another showed him at a construction site, hard hat on, shaking hands with workers. He ended the call and turned to her with a slight smile. Emma, right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Good morning, Mr. Russo. Dominic, please. We're going to be working closely together, so let's skip the formality. He gestured to a chair. Coffee? Jennifer makes excellent coffee. I'm fine, thank you. Dominic studied her for a moment, his dark eyes assessing. You look nervous. I am nervous, Emma admitted. I'm starting a job under unusual circumstances with an employer I barely know. Honest. Good. Dominic sat behind his desk. Let me explain what I need from you. Russo Enterprises is expanding rapidly. We have projects in 3 boroughs right now, with 2 more in development. I spend my time meeting with investors, city officials, contractors, architects. What I need is someone to keep all of that organized. He pulled out a tablet, showed her his calendar. It was chaos. Meetings stacked back to back, some highlighted in red, others marked urgent. Conflicts and overlaps everywhere. "This is why my last 3 assistants quit," Dominic said dryly. "They couldn't keep up. But you managed Morrison's schedule for 4 years. And from what I understand, he was equally demanding." "He was," Emma agreed, relaxing slightly. This was familiar territory. "Do you have a system for prioritizing meetings?" "Not a good one." "Do you use any project management software?" "I have Marco write things down on paper and hand them to me." Emma couldn't help but smile. "That explains the chaos. May I see your project files?" For the next hour, Dominic walked Emma through Russo Enterprises' current projects. There was a luxury apartment building in Williamsburg, a mixed-use development in Long Island City, a historic building renovation in the financial district. He explained each project with genuine enthusiasm, pointing out the architectural plans, discussing the challenges, describing his vision for each property. Emma listened, asked questions, and began to see the pattern of his work. Dominic wasn't just a businessman. He cared about the buildings themselves, about creating spaces people would want to live and work in. There was an artistic element to his approach that surprised her. "The Williamsburg project," Emma said, studying the plans. "You're including affordable housing units?" 20% of the building, yes, it's good business and good for the community." Dominic leaned back in his chair. "I grew up in a neighborhood that got gentrified out from under us. I remember what it feels like to watch your home become unaffordable. I won't do that to others if I can help it." It was the most personal thing he'd said, and it made Emma see him differently. This wasn't just about profit. "You're meeting with the City Planning Commission," Emma said, checking his calendar. "It's scheduled for the same time as your meeting with the Williamsburg investors." "I know. I'll have to reschedule one." "Which is more important?" "Both are critical." Emma thought for a moment. "What if I attended the Planning Commission meeting in your place? I could take detailed notes, record it on my phone, and brief you immediately after. You could handle the investors, which requires your personal touch, and still stay informed about the Planning Commission's concerns." Dominic raised his eyebrows. "You'd be comfortable representing me at a city meeting?" "I spent 4 years representing Morrison at similar meetings. I know how to listen, ask the right questions, and report accurately." Emma met his eyes. "You hired me to make your life easier. Let me do that." A slow smile spread across Dominic's face. "You're going to work out perfectly." "Yes, do that. The meeting is Thursday at 2. They spent the rest of the morning organizing his calendar, setting up systems for prioritizing tasks, and discussing his communication preferences. Emma discovered that Dominic was demanding but reasonable, that he appreciated efficiency, and that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. "My last assistant cried in the bathroom at least once a week," Dominic mentioned while they were setting up filing protocols. "Why?" "I'm told I can be intimidating." Emma glanced at him. He was watching her with that same assessing look, as if testing her reaction. "You're direct and you have high standards. That's not intimidating. That's professional. See? You're already better than the last 3. By noon, Emma had reorganized his entire calendar for the next month, set up a digital project management system, and created a priority matrix for his daily tasks. She'd also drafted emails to contractors, scheduled follow-up meetings, and coordinated with the company's architect about blueprint revisions. It felt good to be useful again, to have purpose. "Lunch," Dominic announced, standing. "There's a place downstairs. My treat, since it's your first day." They took the elevator down to a small Italian restaurant on the ground floor. It was busy with the lunch crowd, but the hostess immediately led them to a quiet table in the back corner. Emma noticed how people looked at Dominic, with respect, with wariness, with recognition. He was known here. "You come here often?" Emma asked after they'd ordered. "My grandmother used to own this place. She sold it 10 years ago, but I still eat here a few times a week. Best pasta in Manhattan." "The woman in the photo in your office?" "Nonna Rosa. She raised me after my parents passed away." Dominic's expression softened. "She's the one who taught me about real estate. She bought this building when no one wanted it, renovated it herself, made it profitable. Everything I know about business I learned from watching her." Emma felt her perception of him shifting again. He wasn't just a powerful businessman. He was someone's grandson, someone shaped by loss and love and family. "She must be proud of what you've built," Emma said. "She thinks I work too hard." "She's probably right." Dominic took a sip of water. "What about you? Family in New York?" "My mother's in Boston. She's a teacher, elementary school. My father passed away when I was 16. "I'm sorry." It was a long time ago. Emma had learned to say this easily, even though the loss still felt present sometimes. My mother wanted me to stay in Boston, become a teacher like her. Safe, stable, predictable. But I wanted more. And you came to New York for more. And Morrison destroyed your career for having integrity. Dominic's expression hardened. Men like him think power protects them from consequences. In his case, it does. Not forever. Something in Dominic's tone made Emma look at him sharply, but his expression had already smoothed back to neutral. How are you settling in so far? Any concerns? Emma hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Everyone's been professional and welcoming. The work is familiar, but I still don't understand why you hired me, Dominic, the real reason. I told you. You told me it's because I was brave enough to kick your car. That can't be the whole truth. Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Have you ever met someone and known immediately they were going to be important? Not romantically, necessarily, but important? Emma thought about Sarah, about their first conversation in a college cafeteria. Yes, that's what I felt watching that security footage. You were furious and desperate and completely authentic. No calculation, no manipulation. Just honest emotion. Dominic leaned forward slightly. I'm surrounded by people who want something from me, Emma. Money, connections, opportunity. Everyone has an angle. But you? You didn't even know who I was when you kicked my car. You weren't trying to impress me or use me. You were just real. It was possibly the most honest thing anyone had said to Emma in years. I'm still real, she said quietly. I still have opinions and principles and a tendency to do stupid things when I'm angry. Good. Don't change that. Dominic smiled. Though maybe avoid kicking any more cars. Their food arrived. Pasta that smelled incredible. Emma realized she hadn't had a proper meal in days. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Can I ask you something? Emma said. Always. Marco. And Vincent. They're not just drivers, are they? Dominic set down his fork. No, they're not. They're security. Why do you need security? I'm a wealthy man in New York City. It's a precaution. It was a reasonable answer, but Emma sensed it wasn't the complete answer. She thought about pressing, then decided against it. First day wasn't the time to push boundaries. They finished lunch and returned to the office. The afternoon was busy. Emma fielded phone calls, coordinated with contractors, prepared documents for upcoming meetings. She met other employees. Sarah Chen, the lead architect, a brilliant woman in her 40s, who designed all of Russo's residential projects. Michael Torres, the financial officer, who looked too young to manage millions in development funds but clearly knew his job. Others whose names Emma struggled to remember, but whose roles she carefully noted. Everyone was professional, competent, and slightly cautious around her. She was Dominic's new assistant, which apparently meant something in this office. At 4:30, Emma was reviewing permit applications when raised voices caught her attention. She looked up to see a man in an expensive but slightly wrinkled suit standing at Jennifer's desk, demanding to see Dominic. Mr. Russo is in a meeting, Jennifer said firmly. If you'd like to make an appointment, I don't need an appointment. Tell him Frank Castellano is here. The name meant nothing to Emma, but Jennifer's face went pale. Please wait here. I'll see if he's available. Jennifer hurried to Dominic's office, knocked urgently. A moment later, Marco appeared from somewhere, positioning himself between the visitor and the rest of the office. Vincent materialized from another direction. Dominic emerged from his office, his expression unreadable. Frank, I didn't expect to see you today. We need to talk. Now. Frank's voice was loud, aggressive. My office then. Dominic's tone was calm but carried an edge Emma hadn't heard before. He glanced at Marco, some unspoken communication passing between them, then led Frank into his office and closed the door. The glass walls were frosted, but Emma could see shadows, gestures. Frank was clearly angry about something. Dominic remained still, controlled. Who is that? Emma asked Jennifer quietly. Frank Castellano. He's a business associate. They have history. Jennifer's discomfort was obvious. It's not usually this confrontational. After 10 minutes, the office door opened. Frank stormed out, his face red. You're making a mistake, Russo. You'll regret this. I'll take my chances, Dominic said evenly. Frank left, and the office seemed to exhale collectively. Dominic returned to his office without comment, though Emma saw him exchange a look with Marco that suggested this was serious. Emma returned to her work, but her mind was racing. Business associate. What kind of business associate showed up unannounced and made threats? At 6 o'clock, Dominic emerged from his office with his coat. "Emma, a word before you leave?" She followed him back into his office. He closed the door, and the glass walls frosted automatically. "About this afternoon," Dominic began. "Frank Castellano and I have competing interests in certain properties. He's frustrated because I outbid him on a development site he wanted. What you witnessed was unprofessional on his part, but it's handled. He threatened you. Frank threatens everyone. It's posturing." Dominic met her eyes. "But I want you to be aware that my business sometimes involves difficult people. Contractors who don't deliver, city officials with agendas, competitors like Frank who don't lose gracefully. It can be uncomfortable." "I managed Morrison's office," Emma reminded him. "I've dealt with difficult people. I know. But if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Understood?" There was something protective in his tone that surprised Emma. "Understood. Good. Now go home. It's your first day. You've done excellent work." Emma gathered her things, said goodnight to Jennifer, and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Marco entering Dominic's office, their heads bent together in serious conversation. On the subway home to Sarah's apartment, Emma replayed the day. The work itself was exactly what Dominic had promised. Legitimate real estate development, nothing unusual. But there were undercurrents, moments that suggested complexity she didn't understand. The security, the cautious respect people showed Dominic, Frank Castellano's threatening visit. What exactly had she gotten herself into? Sarah was waiting when Emma arrived, demanding details about every moment of the day. "He seems legitimate," Emma said, sitting at Sarah's tiny kitchen table with tea. "The company is real, the work is normal real estate development, but there's something else there, something I can't quite identify." "Like what?" "Like, everyone's very careful around him. Like he has security that seems excessive for a real estate developer. Like men show up threatening him over property deals." Emma wrapped her hands around her mug. "But he's also kind. He talked about his grandmother, about growing up in a gentrifying neighborhood, about including affordable housing in his developments. He's complicated." "Complicated men are dangerous men," Sarah warned. "Maybe, or maybe he's just successful enough to have enemies." Emma sighed. "I don't know, Sarah. I'm probably overthinking everything because the job seems too good to be true. It probably is too good to be true, but I need it. So I'm going to do the work, keep my eyes open, and hope I haven't made a terrible mistake." Sarah reached across the table, squeezed Emma's hand. "Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." That night, Emma lay on Sarah's couch and thought about Dominic Russo, about the way he'd looked at her during lunch like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, about his protectiveness when he warned her to tell him if she felt unsafe, about the glimpse of genuine care when he talked about affordable housing and his grandmother. He was dangerous, she was certain of that, but maybe not in the way she'd feared. Maybe he was dangerous because he was making her curious, because he treated her like an equal rather than just an employee, because he'd given her a chance when everyone else had written her off. Emma had spent her adult life trying to do the right thing, and it had cost her everything. Now she was working for a man who existed in moral gray areas she didn't fully understand, but he'd been honest with her so far. And honesty, Emma was learning, was rarer and more valuable than she'd realized. Tomorrow she'd return to Russo Enterprises. She'd do her job, watch carefully, and try to understand the world she'd stepped into. And maybe, gradually, she'd figure out whether Dominic Russo was the lifeline he appeared to be, or the next disaster waiting to happen. 6 months had transformed Emma Walsh's life in ways she couldn't have imagined that cold November day, when she'd kicked a Bentley in frustrated rage. Spring had arrived in New York City, bringing warmth and renewal to the streets. Cherry blossoms bloomed in Central Park, and the city felt alive with possibility. Emma stood at the window of her new apartment, a modest but comfortable one-bedroom in a renovated building in Brooklyn that Russo Enterprises had developed, and marveled at how far she'd come. She was no longer the desperate, unemployed secretary drowning in debt. She was Emma Walsh, executive assistant to Dominic Russo, with a salary that allowed her to breathe, to save, to imagine a future beyond mere survival. But more than that, she'd found something unexpected: purpose, respect, and a partnership that challenged her every day. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Morning meeting moved to 7:30. Coffee on me." Emma smiled. Their working relationship had evolved into something efficient and intuitive. She could anticipate his needs before he voiced them. He trusted her judgment on increasingly important decisions. What had started as simple administrative work had grown into genuine collaboration on projects. She'd also learned more about his world, the complexity beneath the legitimate business surface. There were meetings she wasn't invited to, phone calls he took privately, associates like Frank Castellano who represented interests she didn't fully understand. But Dominic had never asked her to do anything unethical, never compromised her principles. An hour later, Emma walked into the Russo Enterprises office with 2 coffees from the cafe downstairs. The space felt like home now. She knew everyone's names, understood the rhythm of the business, had earned the respect of architects and contractors who initially dismissed her as just another assistant. Dominic was already at his desk, reviewing plans for the newest project, a community center in Queens that would provide affordable space for local organizations. "You're early," Emma said, handing him coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Been thinking about the Queens project." He looked up and Emma saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "The financing fell through. The investor got nervous about the neighborhood." "What does that mean?" "It means the project might die, which means a community that desperately needs this space won't get it." Dominic's frustration was evident. "I can't fund it entirely myself without jeopardizing other developments." Emma sat down thinking. Over 6 months she'd learned that Dominic cared deeply about projects that served communities rather than just generating profit. This wasn't about money, it was about impact. "What if we approach it differently?" Emma suggested. "Instead of one large investor, what about multiple smaller investors? Local businesses, community organizations, people who have a stake in the neighborhood's success." Dominic considered this. It would take longer to organize, but it would create community ownership. People invest in what they help build. Emma pulled out her tablet, already making notes. "I can research potential investors, draft proposals, coordinate outreach. If you can extend the timeline with the city, we might make this work." Dominic smiled, the genuine smile that still surprised her when it appeared. "You're not just my assistant anymore, are you? I stopped being just your assistant 3 months ago when you asked my opinion on the Williamsburg design." Emma returned his smile. "I'm a partner in this work now, whether my title reflects that or not." "Then maybe we should change your title." Dominic stood, walked to the window. "Director of Community Development. You'd oversee projects like Queens, coordinate with neighborhood organizations, ensure we're building things that matter. Salary increase to match, of course." Emma's breath caught. "You're serious." "I'm always serious about good ideas, and you're full of them." He turned back to her. "You've earned this, Emma. You came here desperate and uncertain, and you've become invaluable. Say yes." "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." What followed was the busiest, most fulfilling month of Emma's life. She coordinated with community leaders in Queens, presented proposals to potential investors, worked alongside Sarah Chen to adjust the building designs based on neighborhood input. The project took on new life, funded by dozens of smaller investors who believed in the vision. But success brought visibility, and visibility brought danger. Frank Castellano had been watching. He saw Emma's growing importance in Dominic's business, saw how much Dominic relied on her judgment, and he decided to make a move. Emma was leaving the office late one Thursday evening when a black car pulled up beside her. Frank Castellano stepped out, all false charm and calculated menace. "Ms. Walsh, we should talk." "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Castellano." "I think we do. I'm prepared to offer you $200,000 to provide information about Russo's upcoming property bids. Simple business intelligence. No one gets hurt." Emma felt ice in her veins. This was the moment Sarah had warned her about, the moment when the complexity of Dominic's world demanded a choice. "I'm not interested." Frank's expression hardened. "Refusing me is unwise. I can make your life very difficult. Then you'll have to do that. Because I won't betray someone who gave me a chance when no one else would." Emma held his gaze, channeling the same desperate courage that had led her to kick that car 6 months ago. "Now please move your car. You're blocking the sidewalk." She walked away on shaking legs, feeling his eyes on her back. As soon as she was around the corner, she called Dominic. He arrived within 10 minutes, Marco and Vincent with him. Emma told him everything. "He approached you directly," Dominic said, his controlled anger evident. "That crosses lines even Frank knows better than to cross. What happens now?" "Now I handle it." "But Emma," Dominic's expression softened. "You could have taken his offer. 200,000 is a significant amount of money. Why didn't you?" Emma thought about the past 6 months. about how Dominic had treated her with respect when she had nothing, about the meaningful work they'd built together, about becoming someone she was proud to be. Because you trusted me when I was at my lowest. Because this work matters. Because, she paused, realizing the truth as she spoke it. Because loyalty isn't something I'm willing to sell. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. You've become more than an employee, Emma. You've become someone I trust completely. That's rare in my world. 3 days later, Frank Castellano's company faced unexpected scrutiny from city regulators. His permits were delayed, his financing questioned. Nothing illegal, nothing Emma needed to know details about, but Frank's ability to threaten Dominic's business was significantly reduced. Emma learned then that Dominic protected what mattered to him, but he did it strategically within legal boundaries. He wasn't a hero, but he wasn't a villain either. He existed in the complicated space where most real people lived, doing their best with imperfect choices. 2 weeks after the incident, Dominic invited Emma to dinner at Lucia's restaurant, the one his grandmother had owned. This isn't a work dinner, he clarified. This is me thanking you for your loyalty, for choosing to stay when leaving would have been profitable. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything except work. Emma learned about Dominic's childhood in Brooklyn, about losing his parents young, about Nonna Rosa teaching him that real wealth was measured in relationships, not money. She shared her own story, growing up in Boston, losing her father, coming to New York with dreams that had been delayed but not destroyed. When you kicked my car, Dominic said, a smile playing at his lips, I saw someone who refused to accept defeat quietly, someone with fire. I wanted that fire in my life, even if I didn't understand why. And now I understand. You make me better, Emma. You remind me why I do this work, not for profit, but for impact. Not for power, but for purpose. Emma felt something shift between them. Not romantic exactly, but deeper than professional. A recognition that they'd become partners in the truest sense. I have something for you, Dominic said, pulling out a small frame. Inside was a printed image, security footage of Emma kicking his car, her face furious and desperate and alive. Your finest moment, he said with a genuine laugh. Emma laughed too, looking at that image of who she'd been, broken and angry and refusing to accept defeat quietly. No, she said softly. This is my finest moment. Right here, right now. Everything that came after that kick. 6 months ago, Emma Walsh had destroyed something expensive in a moment of rage and desperation, but that destruction had led to creation, of a career, of purpose, of a version of herself stronger than she'd imagined possible. She'd walked through a door she'd kicked open and found a life waiting on the other side. Some endings were really beginnings. Some disasters were opportunities. Some chances, the scary, uncertain ones that made you question everything, were exactly what you needed to become who you were meant to be. Emma raised her glass. To doors we break and the courage to walk through them. Dominic raised his glass to meet hers. To courage, and to the people brave enough to use it. They drank together, partners in work and in vision. Two people who'd found in each other exactly what they needed. Trust, respect, and the freedom to become their best selves. Outside, New York City sparkled with lights and possibility. A canvas of millions of stories, including theirs. The secretary and the businessman who found partnership in unlikely circumstances. And Emma Walsh, looking at her reflection in the restaurant window, finally recognized herself. Strong, capable, exactly where she belonged.